Dad, come to my house now. Don't tell anyone. Evan. That message popped up right as I let the last handful of dirt fall onto the black coffin where everyone believed my son was resting. I froze in the foggy cemetery, my hands shaking, eyes glued to the words on the screen. Evan had been declared dead from a heart attack 3 days earlier. Death certificate, funeral. Everything was so real it left no room for doubt. But the person who texted me used his exact phrasing, his exact punctuation. A few hours earlier, Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, had posted a photo in a bright red bikini, clinking glasses with the gardener Diego on a Mexican beach. The caption read, "Freedom has never tasted so sweet." I looked at the photo and, for the first time, I didn't feel pain, I felt cold. A cold that felt like a warning. I slipped the phone into my pocket and walked away from the grave in silence. If my son's death was a performance, then Vanessa was about to play the final role of her life, and it might be the most tragic one she'll ever have. If you're still here, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Every comment helps this story reach more hearts, and if it moved you, give it a like so others can find it too. My name is Samuel Grant, 71, widower for 10 years. I've lived my whole life in the same small house in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where long, bitter winters teach people how to endure in silence. I used to be a mechanical engineer, the kind of man who believed that if you do things right and do enough, life will pay you back with fairness. Then I learned fairness is sometimes a mirage for the naive. After my wife passed, my son Evan was all I had. I watched him grow up, build a career, get married, buy a home, and I thought his life would be smoother than anything I'd ever dreamed of. I'm not rich, not much of a talker, just an old man who likes to make coffee in the morning and listen to the wind under the porch. But the day Evan died, the last calm part of me died with him. And when I got that text from the dead, I knew maybe God wasn't letting me rest yet. That morning, Milwaukee sank under thick fog. The sky looked like a crumpled gray sheet pressing down on the bare trees in the cemetery. I stood motionless by the coffin, the back of my suit jacket damp from the mist, while the priest read the final words. Only 41 people came to Evan's funeral, mostly former co-workers, neighbors, a few friends from college. Vanessa, his wife of 8 years, wasn't one of them. I kept making excuses for her in my head. Maybe she was in shock, maybe she couldn't bear it. But when the murmurs started, I knew I couldn't stop them from thinking worse. Is she not coming? I heard they were separated. Maybe she's too devastated to handle it. Those whispers stabbed into me like cold pins. I looked down at my hands gripping the eulogy, took a long breath, and stepped up. My son, Evan Grant, lived fully for work, for responsibility, for family, I said, my voice shaking. Since he was a boy, he always wanted to do the right thing, even when it cost him. I talked about Evan's childhood, us playing baseball in the backyard, his graduation from Northwestern, the way his eyes lit up when he launched his first consulting firm. I didn't mention the anxiety, the sleepless nights, or the bitter arguments between Evan and Vanessa, things only an old father would know, and had tried to bury with him. When the service ended, people shook my hand, offered sympathy, then drifted away. I counted exactly 41, but not Vanessa. I stayed until the coffin was lowered, listening to the sound of dirt hitting the wood, heavy, real, final. Each thud echoed inside my chest. That afternoon, back in my quiet little house, I picked up the phone and called Vanessa. 6 calls, 6 trips to voicemail. Vanessa, it's Dad. Call me back when you get this. Nothing. I tried texting. Still nothing. That night, in a moment of weakness and anger, I opened my laptop. I'd never used Instagram in my life, but today, I had to know. It took only minutes to find Vanessa Reed Grant's account. Her profile picture was still a shot from last year's anniversary, Evan beaming, Vanessa leaning into his shoulder, blonde hair glowing in candlelight. I stared at it until my throat tightened. I scrolled. The new posts knocked the wind out of me. Spa photos, dinners out, shots with her sister in Phoenix, all bright, cheerful, and posted after Evan died. But when I reached the latest one, my heart stopped. Vanessa, in a red bikini, clinking a cocktail with Diego, the Mexican gardener Evan had hired to work the yard. Behind them, Tulum's blue ocean stretched to the horizon. The caption, "Life's too short not to live it." Over 200 likes, dozens of comments. "You deserve your freedom. Evan would want to see you happy. Free at last, Vanessa. Keep living." One comment from @Sarah Reed, "Her sister made my head ring. Finally done with all the drama. Diego is perfect for you. Done with all the drama. My son's death was drama." I shut the laptop, stood up, and went straight to the liquor cabinet. I poured nearly half a glass of whiskey, even though the doctor told me not to. It burned going down, but I felt nothing, just a cold rippling up my spine. Then my phone buzzed. A text. No name, just an unknown number. "Dad, come to my house now. Don't tell anyone. Evan." I dropped the phone onto the floor, the screen cracking at the corner. But I couldn't take my eyes off those words, the way he capitalized Dad, exactly how Evan always did. The dash before his name, another one of his habits. I read it 3 times, then 5. The more I read, the more the blood pounded in my temples. If this was a joke, it was cruel. If it wasn't, there was only one other possibility, colder than any wind in that cemetery. I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and walked out. The road to the Brookfield suburbs was pitch black, headlights smearing across the wet asphalt. It was so quiet I could hear my heartbeat in the car. I didn't know what I was doing, a 71-year-old man, driving in the middle of the night to find a son who'd been buried that afternoon. When I got there, Evan's 2-story house was dark, except for a warm yellow glow from the kitchen. I parked at the curb, took a breath, and used the spare key Evan had given me years ago, "In case you drop by," he'd said. The lock clicked. I stepped in. The smell of old coffee and damp wood hit me. The living room was exactly as I remembered. The wedding photo on the shelf, a frame of the two of us at a 1997 ball game, Evan's coat still hanging on the hook. "Evan?" I called softly. No answer. I walked down the hall toward the light pooling from the back, and there he was. Evan sat at the kitchen table, wrinkled dress shirt, messy hair, thin as a rail. In front of him, a cup of cold coffee without a wisp of steam. "Son," I stammered, "we buried you this afternoon." Evan looked up, eyes sunken, voice rough. "I know, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. But if Vanessa finds out I'm alive, both you and I are in danger." I stood still, mind blank. Every sound drained away except the tick of the wall clock. "Danger from what?" I asked, easing into the chair across from him. Evan met my eyes, fear and desperation mixed there. "I made a mistake, Dad, a mistake that made people want me dead, and if they learn I'm still breathing, they won't just come for me, they'll come for you." The kitchen went quiet. The yellow light lay across 2 faces, one old, one gaunt like the shadows of the same fear. Right then I knew the morning's funeral was only the opening act of something colder than death. And that night, in that silent house, I started listening to a confession that opened a storm no father could be ready for. I stared at my son, searching for words, but my throat locked up. Evan bowed his head, fingers interlaced on the table. His face was hollow. His eyes looked like 2 burnt-out coals. "Tell me plainly, Evan," I rasped. "What's going on?" He let out a long breath, like setting down the world. "I thought everything in my life was fine, Dad. Work, house, marriage. Then I stumbled onto something I couldn't pretend not to see." He lifted his head. The light sharpened his pale cheekbones. I handled our firm's biggest account, Nova Medica, worth nearly $2.4 million a year, a pharmaceutical giant with branches everywhere. Everyone said it was the career breakthrough. I thought so too, until I read their clinical trial reports. I frowned. What reports? Next-gen arthritis drug, codename NMX43. They published spotless results. Safe, effective, no serious side effects. But when I checked the raw data, he stopped, swallowed. I saw deleted lines, missing patient, files. Some people in the trial had died, Dad. They hid it. A chill ran up my back. Did you tell anyone? I reported it to my direct manager. Silence. 2 days later, I got a call from Alan Brewer himself, Nova Medica's CEO. He asked me to meet privately in Chicago to talk off the record. When I arrived, he smiled, poured 2 drinks, and set an envelope on the table. Evan stared past me, like he still heard the clink of glass. Inside was $500,000 in cash. He said, "Every big company has dark corners. You just need to look away, sign off on the data, and keep quiet. You've got a young wife, big house, a mortgage. $500,000 will help you breathe." I clenched my fists. "And you?" I wavered, Evan admitted, voice tight. Vanessa always wanted renovations. A new car, said her friends in Lakeview lived better. She treated life like a competition to have more, and I kept trying to keep up. When Brewer pushed that envelope toward me, I heard Vanessa in my head. "I'm tired of your limits." He paused, then shook his head. But when I got home, I opened the envelope. The bills were crisp. The ink stink made me sick. If I stayed quiet, those people died for nothing. I didn't recognize myself anymore. My chest felt like stone. "What did you do?" "I chose to do the right thing," Evan said slowly, eyes dropping to the table. "I copied every report, recorded my conversation with Brewer, and turned everything over to the FBI. I became a whistleblower. A month later, Nova Medica was under investigation. The batch was pulled. Thousands of prescriptions were canceled. And Brewer, indicted. But before he was arrested, he texted me, 'You just ruined hundreds of careers. I won't let you walk.'" Evan inhaled, his hand trembling. After that, unknown calls, cars parked outside, men loitering by the gate. I knew they were watching me. I sat in silence. It was all too fast, too heavy. So how did it lead to the death? 3 weeks ago, I got word from an insider. Brewer made bail and was cleaning up. He said I was target number 1. I had no choice. Evan's eyes were dull with exhaustion. I called Dr. Nolan Langford, my college friend, now an ER doctor at St. Mary's. I told him everything. Nolan said, "If you want to live, there's only one way." "Faking death?" I asked. He nodded. "We staged the whole thing." Nolan arranged the shift, cut the heart monitor for 15 seconds, logged a cardiac arrest. The death certificate was signed within an hour. The ID file was mistakenly entered. Another John Doe about my age came in the same time. When he passed, Nolan swapped IDs. In the system, Evan Grant was dead. And I was wheeled out that night in a medical waste truck. Goosebumps rose on my arms. Lord. I hid in a small Kenosha apartment, rented under the name Eric Lewis. I cut all contact. Only Nolan knew where I was. I planned to stay hidden at least 6 months, wait out Brewer's case, then find a way out of the country. But I had to be sure. So I watched Vanessa's social media. Evan gave a bitter laugh. 4 days in, I saw her post in black at the funeral, captioned, "Goodbye to the one I love." A week later, Phoenix. Then, Mexico. He looked at me, spent. "Dad." The moment I saw that red bikini, I knew she wasn't playing the grieving widow anymore. She sold me out. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Vanessa knew the plan from the start?" "She did," he said. "She cried, begged me to do it." Said she'd help me disappear, keep the secret, wait 6 months, then meet in Canada. I trusted her, Dad, completely. I left all our accounts, paperwork, even the life insurance in case a real accident happened. He squeezed his hands until the knuckles blanched. But 2 days after the funeral, the life insurance paid out $750,000. She emptied it, flew to Mexico with Diego. And worse, Evan lowered his voice, she emailed my attorney asking about transferring the house title. It felt like someone shoveled rocks into my chest. She thought you were really dead. Yes, and she was happy about it. Evan's laugh was dry. She told the world she was grieving, when in truth, she was celebrating. I looked at my son, the man I'd raised to be honest, to keep his name clean, sitting there like a living ghost. Evan, I said slowly, was all this worth it? You think I had a choice? He asked, voice cracked. If I stayed quiet, thousands more would take a deadly drug. If I spoke up, they'd kill me. And now the one person I trusted betrayed me. But at least I'm alive to watch the truth come out. I nodded, empty of words. Evan wasn't just a victim. He was a man crushed between justice and greed, other people's, and his own. After a moment, he said, voice breaking, Dad, I need time to think, but I'm sure of one thing, Vanessa won't stop here. She has money, motive, and she believes I'm really gone. What she doesn't know is, everything she touches leaves a trail. I kept quiet, watching his eyes harden like steel. Do you have a plan? I asked. Not yet, he said. But she's not going to enjoy that money. Outside, rain started tapping against the window. In the cold kitchen light, I felt our story had only begun. I sat there, staring at Evan. The kitchen ticked with the clock and the drip of rain on the eaves. After a moment, he stood, went to an old leather bag by the fridge, unzipped it, and set a thick, rubber-banded file on the table. Dad, he rasped, this is everything I kept before I died. It's time you saw the whole truth. I pushed my glasses up and looked over the pages packed with text and numbers. Evan opened each section, explaining calmly, but I could hear the anger under every word. The day I told Vanessa I had to disappear to stay alive, she acted so understanding. She hugged me, cried, said she'd play the widow for 6 months and meet me in Canada when things cooled off. I was stupid, Dad. I trusted her completely. He paused to pour water. His hand trembled and a few drops spilled. I gave her access to our joint accounts, told her to withdraw only for living expenses. I left the insurance paperwork so she could process the death, because on paper I was gone. It was all set up to look reasonable, to avoid suspicion. But Evan clenched his fist. On the exact day the court finalized the death notice, Vanessa pulled $700,000 from the life insurance and linked accounts. She didn't wait until the next day. The same afternoon I was declared dead. I lowered my head, the cold spreading through me. She didn't hesitate? He gave a dry smile. Not at all, Dad. 2 days later, my credit card was swiped at a Chicago jeweler, then a 5-star hotel in Phoenix. All signed by her, ironically, in a world where I didn't exist. I flipped through the printouts, hotel bills, restaurant tabs, charges of several $1,000s for clothes, bags, airfare. Those times she said she was going to Phoenix to visit her sister, Evan said, pointing at an Azul Tulum resort invoice in Mexico, were actually vacations with Diego. Same dates, same card. This was the first time, 2 months before the funeral. I couldn't get a word out. I heard my heartbeat thudding. Evan kept going, like he had to or he'd lose his mind. She met him after I hired him to redo the backyard. Diego's around 30, Mexican, smooth talker. At first I thought he was just labor, but she spent more time outside than in. When I traveled, she texted late, turned off location. I didn't want to believe it, but my gut was right. I confronted her once, and she snapped that I was paranoid from stress. Looking back, that's when she started putting the plan in motion. He slid more pages to me, screenshots of emails, bank messages, even exchanges with the insurance companies. See this? She filed this 3 weeks before I faked my death. A new life insurance policy worth over $1 million with herself as co-beneficiary. The payout clause applied only if the insured died 2 years after the policy date. She plans far ahead, Dad. Very far. I stared at Vanessa Reed Grant's signature soft strokes that felt ice cold. I didn't feel grief anymore. It was something else, like realizing I'd been keeping a snake in the house. What was her plan? I asked quietly. To legitimize a clean death, Evan said hoarsely. No criminal risk, full payout. If all went as planned, I'd die from stress, with medical notes about sedatives, plus a handful of evidence of instability. After 2 years, she'd cash. Another $1 million. No one would question it. A perfect suicide from depression. My God, I whispered. She planned even that. Evan nodded. She hired a private investigator too. He took photos of me sitting alone in the car or walking out of the hospital after tense meetings. Vanessa forwarded them to friends, saying I was out of control, severely depressed, rambling. She planted that image so, when I died, no one would ask questions. I remembered the morning of the funeral, neighbors shaking heads, saying Evan's work stress was too much. She'd scripted it step by step. And you knew all this before you died? I asked. Not all, Evan said, eyes darkening. Only when I was in hiding did Nolan help me trace the data. I hacked into her old email and found the exchanges. I saved everything: emails, texts, contracts, receipts. Each piece is a shard. Together, it's the full picture. The wife I loved for 8 years planned to take my life one step at a time. I breathed deep, steadying my voice. And while I was burying your empty coffin, she lifted a glass in Mexico. That's right. Evan looked at me, a cold light in his eyes. She smiled while you stood in the wind, dropping dirt on a box with no one inside. I said nothing. Something in me collapsed the thin faith that people still knew what decency meant. After a moment he spoke, lower. Dad, I'm not saying this to complain. I've cried enough. Now I have one goal. She won't live easy on that money. I looked at my son. In the weak light, he was gaunt but resolute, and there was something new in his eyes. No more weakness, no more fear, just resolve. Evan, I said softly, you think I should let the law handle it? He asked, half smiling, half bitter. She's the perfect widow in everyone's eyes. If I show up now, the whole world will think I'm crazy. No one believes the dead return to accuse their wife. But I have evidence, and I have a plan. And this time, I'm not alone. He gripped my hand. His hand was ice cold but firm, strong. I need you with me, he said. Not just because I'm your blood, but because she humiliated our family, your name, Mom's memory. I want our name back. I looked into his eyes, and in that moment I knew I wasn't turning away. When you've been betrayed to the core, fear doesn't matter. You only want justice, whatever it costs. Outside, the rain had eased. Wind hissed through the gaps like someone too tired to cry. I squeezed Evan's hand back and said slowly, You're not alone, Evan, but be careful. What she traded wasn't just money, it was her soul. He nodded. In the warm kitchen light, my son's eyes looked like fresh forged steel, hot enough to shine, cold enough to cut through the dark. I know, he said, quiet but firm. And I promise you, she's never going to wear that smile again. I didn't ask what his plan was. I just sat there, listening to the clock hands sweep and my son's breathing quicken. The old grief still smoldered in me, but under it, for the first time after days of mourning, I felt a thin, unmistakable thread of light. The truth was coming back, and justice wasn't going to let her walk free. After that night, Evan and I began living in 2 different worlds. One, dead. the other left behind to act convincingly. The next morning, he sat at the kitchen table, hair still messy, but his voice was different. Calm, clear, intentional. "Dad," he said, "we can't charge in on feelings. If we want justice, we have to make her get tangled in the very law she thinks she can beat." He opened his laptop. A stack of legal documents filled the screen. At the top of each file was the name Alicia Park, a Korean-American attorney, Evan's old college friend, specializing in finance and insurance disputes. "I contacted Alicia before I faked my death," Evan explained. "She's the only person besides you and Dr. Nolan who knows I'm alive. We set up a file called a conditional dispute petition, basically, a payout dispute that triggers if signs of fraud show up after I die." I was stunned. Evan had planned the counterstrike. 3 insurance companies, he went on. Aegis, Horizon, and Continental. Total payout is $1.7 million. When she withdraws the money and spends recklessly, the fraud monitoring system will flag it, and Alicia will file in court. Immediately, the accounts get frozen for investigation. He slid the sample petition to me. The bold heading read, "Suspicion of fraudulent claim following declared death." A chill ran down my spine. "So you just wait for her to walk into the trap?" "Exactly," Evan said, disturbingly steady. "I'll let her fly high for 2 weeks, spending, posting, showing off. The louder she is, the easier to prove. Then, in a single night, every account freezes, every card declines, every stream of money disappears." I sat there, torn between admiration and sorrow. A son who should have been at the height of his career was hiding in a shabby apartment, laying out a plan to make his own wife pay like a criminal. But Evan wasn't my fragile boy anymore. He had become a man who understood that justice doesn't always sit in a courtroom, it's in how you wait for the wicked to slip on their own pride. Before I left the apartment, Evan handed me a thick envelope. "Keep this, Dad. It's the new will." I stopped. "New will?" "Yeah. The old one had Vanessa as beneficiary. I've changed it. She's permanently disinherited for adultery and fraud. All assets, shares, and control of my private company go to you as temporary guardian. When this is over, I'll restructure it. But right now, this protects you from any legal blowback." I took the envelope, my fingers trembling, every line on that paper pressed on my chest. A father who wanted nothing more than to see his son live in peace had become the appointed steward in a legal chess match between his son and a betraying wife. In the days that followed, I began my role. Every morning, I drove to the cemetery and stood before the stone that read, "Evan Grant, 1989, 2024. Under that dirt, no one was there, just a heavy, empty coffin padded with a few sandbags to make it weigh right. But I stood anyway, watching the wreaths wilt day by day, like showing up could keep the performance alive. I said a few empty words, pretended to pray, then stood in silence for a long time. Sometimes people would stop and put a hand on my shoulder. "Mr. Grant, we're so sorry. Losing a son that young. No one deserves that." I only bowed and thanked them in a low voice, enough for them to believe I'd made peace with tragedy. Of course, no one knew that as soon as I left the cemetery, I went back to Evan's temporary apartment where my dead son was still breathing and tracking every move of the wife who betrayed him. Neighbors began to whisper too. "Where's Vanessa?" "Probably back with family in Phoenix. I heard she's devastated. Poor thing." I just nodded and gave the usual line. "She's with family. She needs time to heal." They looked at me with sympathy. Some pressed a loaf of bread or a small bouquet into my hands. I took it all, smiled, then set it on the dining table next to a photo of Evan and Vanessa on their wedding day 8 years ago. In it, she smiled sweetly, her hand on his chest, the ring on her finger the same ring I no longer knew the whereabouts of. On Instagram, the grieving widow lived a completely different life. Evan showed me on the computer. Photo after photo. Tulum beaches, bright blue cocktails, a blaze of sunset behind her, then spa shots, restaurants, a yacht. In more than a few, Diego the gardener had his arm around her, both of them grinning like people who'd just slipped out from under something heavy. I didn't know why my anger had gone. I just felt cold. The same cold as when my hand touched my son's headstone, his name carved in stone while the real man sat next to me in the dark room. On the 10th night, Evan's attorney, Alicia Park, emailed both of us. Everything matches. Post on the 14th. Tulum sunset. Charge of $4,120 at Azul Resort at the same time. Post on the 16th. Spa totaling $1,800. Post on the 19th. Domestic flight Cancun to Merida, $950. Statements, locations, timestamps, perfectly aligned. The 3 insurance companies had opened fraud investigations. She said freeze orders would go out within 24 hours, once the system saw luxury spending inconsistent with a mourning period. Evan finished reading, just nodded. Let the rules do the rest, he said. 3 days later, just as predicted, the storm hit. I was watering the porch plants when my phone buzzed nonstop. Bank alerts, card alerts, emails from fraud monitoring everything within 10 minutes. I called Evan. He said only one line. It started. About $80,000 had vaporized in just 2 weeks in Mexico. The insurance systems auto-flagged unusual activity and immediately froze every connected account. Vanessa's cards were declined, credit lines slashed, deposits locked for review. That afternoon, Vanessa posted one more photo, the last before everything collapsed. She stood in front of a luxury hotel in a white dress, a champagne flute in hand. The caption, "Freedom feels expensive, but it's worth it." And now, that freedom was bought with crooked money. What part of this made you shiver the most? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes your words help me understand justice and people a little more. Evan glanced at it, then shut the screen. That line's going straight into the fraud file, he said softly, voice flat as steel. The next night, there were no more posts. On my phone instead were dozens of missed calls from a familiar number. Vanessa. I ignored them. Then the voicemail came. Her voice panicked. Dad, it's me. I'm in trouble. The hotel won't take my card. They say the account's messed up. I tried to withdraw cash, no luck. Diego, I can't reach him. Please call me. I'm scared. 10 minutes later, another message, breath coming hard. Dad, I'm stuck in Mexico. They said they'll hold my passport if I don't pay. I don't know what's happening. Please, help me. Her voice wasn't sweet or proud anymore. It was shaky, frantic, half crying, half screaming, the sound of someone realizing the world was no longer on her side. I replayed the messages, wrote them down, and sent them to Evan. He didn't react right away, just stared off for a few seconds. Finally, he nodded and spoke very slowly. She's starting to learn what losing everything feels like. And tomorrow, she'll fly back and face the rest of the game. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, listening to the soft rain on the eaves, remembering family dinners when Evan and Vanessa were still fine. She used to smile at me, pour me more wine, and say, Dad, you're lucky to have a son like Evan. I believed her. I loved her like my own. And in a few months, she became someone cold enough to fake tears over an empty coffin and head to the airport with a fresh passport to enjoy freedom. Now that freedom was evaporating with every declined on the statements. The next morning, Evan texted. She booked United Flight 30087 to Chicago, arrival at 8:30 p.m. Don't pick her up. Let her come to you. We need to see how she acts when she hits reality. I read it with a mix of dread and bitter anticipation. Part of me was still a father, still hoping it could end there, that Vanessa would understand. apologize, regret it all, and vanish from our lives. But the look in Evan's eyes last night told me that wouldn't happen. That afternoon, I passed by the cemetery again. The sky was leaden. Cold wind moved through the rows of stones, the smell of damp grass mixed with fresh-turned earth. I stood longer than usual, staring at the name Evan Grant and thinking, tomorrow she'll see a different world. One where my son isn't a victim anymore. I set a bundle of white daisies down, drew a deep breath, and headed home. On the drive, the radio played "Knockin' on Heaven's Door." I let out a small laugh, half bitter, half ironic. She thought she was living in heaven. Tomorrow, when the wheels touch down, that heaven will turn into a legal trapdoor, cold and with no way out. And when that happens, I, the old man she dismissed, will be the first person she calls. But this time, my answer will be different. Not words, just the silence of justice waiting. That night, Chicago was freezing. A misty drizzle hung like smoke over empty streets. I sat in the living room, the lamplight falling across Evan's note with a few lines of instructions. Don't go meet her. Let her call. Everything will unfold on its own. At exactly 9:48 p.m., the phone rang. Vanessa. Her voice caught between breaths. Uncle, please. I just got home. Something's wrong. The door won't open. It looks like someone changed the locks. I stood up, keeping my voice even. Calm down, Vanessa. What did you say? Both the front and back doors are rekeyed. There's a paper from the FBI or something says asset investigation. I don't understand any of this. The bank says errors. My phone's glitching nonstop. Please come. I'm scared. I checked the clock. Right on Evan's schedule. All right, I said. Wait there. I'm coming. By the time I arrived, the street was muffled in fog. Streetlights slicked over wet metal. Evan's house, once warm with laughter, was silent, smelling of damp earth and the hiss of wind through bare branches. Vanessa huddled under the eave, in a wrinkled sweater, suitcase by her feet. She didn't look like someone toasting sunsets in Mexico anymore. Hair a mess, dark circles, a face gone slack after a bad dream. Uncle. She lunged over and grabbed my arm. I don't know what's happening. The house is locked. The bank froze everything. The hotel in Mexico made me pay extra fees. I'm terrified. I looked at her without answering right away. The paper on the door bore the FBI seal, Federal Bureau of Investigation, with bold lines beneath. Property under federal investigation. Ongoing inquiry regarding suspected insurance fraud and wire transfer irregularities. I nodded, feigning just enough surprise. It spelled out, Vanessa. Fraud, investigation, and suspicious transfers. Her mouth fell open. Her voice trembled. No, that can't be. They must be mistaken. Evan really died, didn't he? I didn't do anything wrong. I sighed, pulled out my phone, and called Alicia Park, really a pre-recorded clip, just so I could say the key phrases loud enough. Alicia, I'm here now. Yes, she's present. The FBI notice is clearly posted. What? Forgery? Got it. And wire transfers too? Cancun, right. I'll relay that to her. Vanessa froze. Her lips moved, barely a whisper. Oh, how do they know about Cancun? The question shot out by reflex, and in half a second she realized she'd slipped. I met her eyes. So you were in Cancun? No. I mean, just a quick stop, only a few days. Sarah, my sister, told me to take a break to get through the grief. I cut in, voice low and cold. I saw it all. Photos of you and Diego on the beach. Charges to Evans. Accounts while we were still at the funeral. What's your explanation for that? Her face drained. She sagged against the wall like her legs wouldn't hold. You don't understand. Our marriage was complicated. Evan was depressed, distant. I just wanted to feel alive again. I didn't mean to. I clenched my hand. For a second I saw myself 4 weeks ago, an old man alone by a graveside, rain hitting my shoulders, while she posted that freedom has never tasted so sweet. "Vanessa," I said slowly, "Evan told me you were the one reason he tried to be better. And you chose to pour drinks on a beach while I buried an empty coffin. You call that feeling alive?" Tears streaked through her makeup. I didn't know it would come to this. I just wanted out of the pressure. I didn't know everything would collapse." "You did," I cut in. "You knew exactly what you were doing when you signed policies, moved money, hired a P.I., and fake cried to me on the phone. You knew." Vanessa sank onto the steps and covered her face. Her sobs rose into the wind, but I didn't hear 1 ounce of remorse, only the fear of someone realizing the money dream was popping like sea foam. After a while she looked up, voice shredded. What am I supposed to do now?" I stood straight, looking down at the woman who stepped over my son like a puddle. "Get a lawyer, and don't run. The FBI doesn't knock twice." I turned my back and walked away. Behind me, Vanessa's voice choked out. "Uncle, will Evan forgive me?" I paused for a beat, but didn't turn around. "You don't need Evan's forgiveness. You need to face the court." I left the block and got in the car. It was still raining. Each drop hit the windshield like a ticking countdown. As I turned down the empty street, I looked in the rear view. Vanessa was still slumped on the porch, head bowed, a small figure in the dim yellow light. I didn't see a widow. I saw someone who had just dropped her one-way ticket into an abyss. When I got to Evan's apartment, he was sitting by the window with his laptop open. When he saw me, he asked one question: "How is she?" I took off my coat, sat down, and answered evenly. "She's panicked." Pale eyes, shaking hands, stumbling over her words. She asked how the FBI knew about Cancun. A short silence. Then Evan nodded, his eyes going cold, a thin smile like a razor flicking across his mouth. "Good. Time for her to learn that every party has a bill. And this bill will be very expensive." Outside the window, the night wind pushed the damp smell of rain and earth. I sat watching my son, feeling both pain and relief. At last, the wheels of justice had begun to move, not loudly but surely, and I knew tonight, in the house across the street, Vanessa's last smile had gone out for good. 6:20 a.m. The first knock came through the mist. 3 heavy, decisive raps, the kind that carry authority. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, open up!" The shout woke the shabby motel on the outskirts of Chicago. A few guests peered through curtains. Room 14 cracked open, and within seconds Vanessa appeared, hair messy, wearing an old gray sweater, her face ashen. What's happening?" she stammered. The agent read the warrant in a steady, cold voice. "Vanessa Reed Grant, you are under arrest for insurance fraud, conspiracy to defraud, and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in court." Vanessa froze, eyes wide. She tried to speak, but her hands were already turned behind her back. The click of handcuffs closing was cold against the small room. The metallic sound in that cramped space felt like the final rush of a wrong note. As they led her away, other guests watched and murmured. A middle-aged woman whispered, "She looks familiar. I think she was that young widow from last month." But Vanessa couldn't hear any of it. They pushed her into the car. Her hair fell forward, her eyes vacant. On her right wrist, the Cartier bracelet that had once flashed in the light was now a symbol of guilt bought with the insurance money from the husband she thought was dead. News reached me a few hours later. An agent contacted Evan's lawyer to confirm that the suspect had been taken into custody and all accounts were fully frozen. Bail was estimated at $500,000, but when they checked, there was no legal source of funds. All accounts, all cards, every withdrawal channel were blocked. Evan said nothing, just nodded. I looked at my son. His eyes had lost the fire of anger and taken on the calm of someone who had seen an inevitable outcome. We sat in a roadside diner. Small place, dark wood, the smell of roasted coffee mixed with old frying oil. Outside, the snow was slowly melting on the glass. A cup of coffee sat cold in front of Vista, each of us. We didn't speak for a long time. Just the radio soft with a weather report. Evan sat across from me, staring past the steamed window. "It's over," he said quietly, almost to himself. "She's being questioned. Miguel Diego, whatever name she wants to call him, left Mexico 2 days ago. The FBI extracted all his flashy posts, pictures with Vanessa, transfers from her account. Everything ties perfectly." I stirred my coffee and watched the dark swirl around the worn silver spoon. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Evan looked up with an oddly calm voice. "Time to come back. Legalize everything." My chest tightened. "Are you sure? They could get suspicious. This story. It's so outrageous people might not believe it." Evan gave a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dr. Langford handled that. He called this morning. The hospital agreed to take responsibility. The new records will say, an identification error during handling of the O's corpse. You didn't die, only went into a deep coma. The heart monitor system failed. A nurse signed the wrong paperwork." I exhaled. "And if they dig deeper?" "Nolan, Dr. Langford has the legal angle ready," Evan said. "He's prepared to testify that he found the mismatch when he checked DNA samples against stored records. The hospital will accept administrative responsibility to avoid lawsuits. It sounds unlikely, but legally it's solid enough to restore your identity." I was quiet for a long moment. Outside, morning light cut through the gray sky and cast a pale yellow onto my son's face. "And after that?" I asked. Evan smiled lightly. "Then all insurance payouts become void. Because the insured person is still alive. All the money she withdrew, every transfer, every charge, those become evidence of insurance fraud. She'll have to pay back everything, plus interest, and face a minimum of 10 years behind bars." I sat listening, a strange mix of sorrow and satisfaction stirring in me. I had believed in justice my whole life, but never thought it would come like this, silent, without guns or noisy courtroom spectacle, just chains of legal linking tightening, one by one, until the offender had no air left. Around 8 a.m., Evan's phone buzzed. A message from Alicia. Confirmed. The defendant was moved to Cook County Holding, coordinating with the hospital on identification records. "Nolan will see you at 9:30. Evan set the phone down and took my hand. His hand was thinner now. The bones showed, but the grip was steady. I felt a warmth there I had thought lost forever. "Dad," he said slowly, "I know you never wanted this to go so far, but without you, I couldn't have made it here." I squeezed his hand and looked out at the street where the morning mist was peeling away. "I just did what a father should, protecting my son from evil, even when that evil wears the face of someone who called me Dad." Evan nodded. When he mentioned his mother gone now, his eyes brightened a little. Maybe she'd understand. And if she can see, I think she'd be proud. We sat for a while longer, saying nothing. Outside, the day rose, and for the first time in months, the air didn't smell only of morning. When we left the diner, I looked back down the misted road and thought, justice isn't loud, it knows how to squeeze. Not with shouts or showy convictions, but with the cold patience of time, step by step, until the evil rots away in plain daylight. Evan walked beside me, thin but upright. We squeezed each other's hands. Ahead of us stood the hospital, the place where he had died 2 weeks before. Now that same place would witness his legal resurrection, and I knew the final step was right ahead. No more darkness, no more lies, just father and son together on the first morning of justice. 4th floor General Medicine, Street Augustine Hospital. The Hallway smelled of disinfectant. Heart monitors clicked in steady rhythms, matching the soft swoosh of a nurse's shoes on vinyl. I stood outside room 417, coffee cup clenched in my fingers, my heart speeding with each minute. Inside, Evan leaned against white pillows, wearing an oversized hospital gown with an IV in his arm. His face was thin, but the color had returned. When I walked in, he gave me a small, incredulous smile, half weak, half unable to believe this person had died 2 weeks earlier. "Dad's here," he said softly. "Yeah. You look better than I expected," I said, trying to keep my voice steady though my throat tightened. A few minutes later, Dr. Nolan Langford came in. He wore a white coat, his face calm, but I could see the tension in his eyes. Behind him were 2 hospital representatives, a middle-aged woman and a younger man in a gray suit. Dr. Langford adjusted his glasses and spoke in an even tone. "Mr. Grant, Street Augustine Hospital, offers a sincere apology for the serious medical error that occurred 2 weeks ago. Due to a misidentification during patient handling, your son's records were mistakenly matched to a deceased individual. As a result, an incorrect death certificate was issued." He paused and took a breath. "After comparing blood samples and stored DNA data, we can confirm that Evan Grant was never deceased. The hospital will assume full responsibility for medical costs and any legal liabilities. A detailed report will be sent to Illinois health authorities and to your family's attorney." The woman nodded and handed me an envelope stamped in red. "This is the official confirmation document. A copy has been forwarded to the insurance companies and to the police." I felt like I was living in a bizarre dream. My hands trembled and, despite myself, tears came, real tears, though I had rehearsed my part in this plan. I sat down by the bed and held Evan's hand. My son is alive," I said, both choked and laughing, tears blurring my glasses. To the people in the room, it looked like the emotional reaction of a father. For me, it was the moment justice came back with a stamp in red ink. When the others left, it was just the 2 of us, and the pale light through the window. I pulled up Vanessa's photo from Tulum on my phone, the red dress, the cocktail, that arrogant smile. "Look at this," I said. Evan took the phone and stared. His face changed, first stunned, then frowning, then into a cold I had never seen. "She posted that right after the funeral. That night," I said. Caption: "Freedom feels expensive, but it's worth it." Evan said nothing. He stared at the image for a long time, then shut the screen and set the phone down. "She thought it was all over," he said in a small voice, edged like a blade. "But she forgot that the truth can wait." I told him everything: the motel raid this morning, the arrest, Diego's disappearance. Evan kept a composed face, exactly as Alicia instructed, be surprised but not overplayed. "FBI?" he asked, voice catching. "Yes. They arrested her for insurance fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. All accounts frozen. Bail set at $500,000, but there's no money." Evan looked down and nodded, eyes showing something that was part pain and part relief. "It's done," he said quietly. "Everything's finished, Dad." Around noon, the hospital sent the official letter. It was short. A misidentification led to a mistaken death certificate. Evan Grant is confirmed alive. Due to professional error, the hospital assumes full cost and legal support. I read every word and felt a stone lift from my chest. That letter, simple as it sounded, was the key to voiding all paid insurance claims. And at the same time, it proved that the dead man was not dead and the widow was not innocent. Alicia messaged right after, "Receive the copy. Everything is valid. I will file to officially restore Evan's living status." Also filing for non-prosecution for Dr. Langford, the hospital has accepted collective fault. He is safe. I read it to Evan. He nodded and gave a small smile. "He took a risk," he said. "Without Nolan, I'd have had no chance." I put my hand on his shoulder. "No, Evan. He just helped you finish the path of justice you started. You deserve this." In the afternoon, snow began to fall. Tiny white flakes drifted in the wind, dusting the parking lot outside. The room was quiet save for the steady beeps of the monitor. Evan leaned back, white light reflecting in his dark eyes. He spoke softly, almost a whisper. "After this, Evan Grant has to die again on paper." I looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I can't keep living as that name. Media, legal records, insurance, everyone knows Evan Grant now as a symbol of a big fraud case. I need a new beginning, a new name. Not to run, but to live in peace. To let you be at peace." I studied him. In that pale light his face showed the lines of someone who'd lost, been betrayed, and been reborn. There was no fear anymore, only a quiet faith. I nodded slowly. "Then we'll bury Evan Grant again. But this time, not because of death, because of life." He gave a faint smile. "And Dad, you'll still be the only one who knows who I really am." I squeezed his hand. "Have you thought of a new name?" Evan closed his eyes. In a voice so low only I could hear, Robert Hale, a man who lost everything and chose to start over from the ashes." I nodded. "That's a good name." Outside, the snow kept falling. Blank and quiet, no footprints. I watched the first sunlight peek from behind the gray clouds, landing on the thin blanket of snow in the lot. A simple, clean, new beginning, as if God wanted to wash everything clean. I sat by my son's bedside, listening to his heart keep time with the machine. To many, it might be a paper resurrection. But for me, the father who had once dropped handfuls of dirt onto an empty coffin, it was a real miracle. And in that moment I knew. The snow outside wasn't just falling on the window. It was covering a life of mistakes, making a path for the two of us to walk on with a new name, a new life, and a dawn of justice that had arrived just in time. A message from Alicia Park came on a gray morning when the snow had nearly melted and water dripped down the window. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed. The screen showed one short line. "FBI confirms. Diego is not just a gardener." I sat down, my heart quickening. Evan looked up from his stack of files, eyes asking. I read the next message aloud, my voice rough. "Diego Morales, also known as Elias Duarte, is a key member of a federal fraud ring. He specializes in targeting wealthy or vulnerable women, especially widows or wives of men in marital crisis. The goal: seize assets, manipulate insurance contracts, and launder money through shell companies." Evan sighed. "And Vanessa thought she was the hunter." I looked at my son and felt bitter. Turns out, she was the prey. According to the report Alicia forwarded later, Vanessa was the third victim in an 18-month investigation. The FBI had followed Diego since last year, when he appeared beside a woman in Dallas whose husband had died in a suspicious workplace accident. Like Vanessa, that woman received a huge insurance payout, then spent nearly everything on a getaway with her new love in Cancun. 3 months later, she was found dead in her bathtub, ruled an accidental fall. Diego disappeared. The case closed as an undetermined accident. When Vanessa posted the Tulum photo with him, the FBI began to zero in. They didn't expect the case to open up the whole Nova Medica network, where Diego was actually a broker moving money, between players laundering cash from Alan Brewer's pharmaceutical company. "I get it now," Evan said, voice low. Brewer and Diego were two heads of the same snake. Brewer laundered money through insurance contracts. Diego handled the dirty cash with the widows who thought they were clever. I sat in silence. A chill ran down my spine. In the end, it was all just a circle of guilt, and Vanessa, the one who had smiled online about freedom, was only the third puppet being pulled by strings. That afternoon, Alicia called directly. Her voice was clear and precise, with a trace of fatigue. They traced the entire money flow, from Vanessa's account in Illinois, through Mexico, then to the shell company, Blue Crest Imports, in Panama. Every transaction passed through Diego. The chain of evidence is complete. She paused a moment, then spoke more slowly. Alan Brewer, the CEO of Nova Medica, died suddenly in jail this morning. Suspected cardiac arrest, but the FBI hasn't confirmed it. No one in the network dares to speak now. The Nova Medica system is collapsing faster than expected. I looked at Evan. He didn't say anything, just tightened his grip on the cup in his hand. Coffee splashed over the edge and ran in a long streak across the table. I used to think I'd have to live in fear for the rest of my life, he said quietly. But it looks like they're the ones destroying themselves, I answered. Justice can be slow, but it never forgets. A week later, we were invited to the Chicago field office of the FBI to sign witness confirmation paperwork. Outside the building it was cold, the air carrying the damp of melting snow. I waited in the ground floor hall, watching people come and go, each carrying a piece of their own story, guilt, secrets, or a hope to start over. Close to noon, a group of agents led a woman past. Vanessa. She wore a jail-issue orange coat, hands cuffed, eyes down, nothing left of the woman who had stepped out of a Mexican resort with a smug smile. Her face was gaunt, dark circles sank under her eyes, and her hair hung in greasy strands. I stood still and said nothing. As she passed, her lost gaze flicked over me just for an instant, but enough for me to see that the fire of confidence inside her had gone out completely. An agent murmured to a colleague, "The public defender's negotiating a plea, 10 to 15 years, if she cooperates." I heard it but felt no glee, only an emptiness. Some victories don't bring joy, they just leave you more tired. That afternoon, back home, I opened the window. The first spring sunlight of the year slid into the room and glinted on the table where the hospital's confirmation letter still lay. Evan, or I should say Robert Hale now, was sorting papers, preparing for the next phase, joining WITSEC, the Federal Witness Protection Program. The FBI representative had been clear. Given the scope of the case and the identities involved, we recommend Mr. Hale change his name, relocate to another state, and start a new life. We'll provide full support, Evan agreed, without hesitation. I looked at my son, feeling both light and heavy at once. "Are you scared?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, Dad. I've died twice already. The first time was at someone else's hands. The second is so I can live." I gave a sad smile and turned to the window. The late afternoon sky was an odd, clear blue. Swallows flew low, the wind brushed lightly through wet leaves. Maybe justice isn't the loud convictions or splashy arrests. Sometimes justice is simply when the truth finally surfaces, and those who survive get the chance to step out of the shadows. Toward evening, I stood outside the federal building one more time. The crowd had dispersed. Only a few agent cars sat on the steps. I watched them lead Vanessa through, still bowed, still silent. I didn't hate her anymore, because I understood. There are valleys. In life, you have to walk through before you can meet the dawn. And that dawn, this morning, was shining straight into my eyes, the clean light I thought I'd never see again all year. After everything, Evan Grant couldn't come back, not on paper, at least. From the world's point of view, he was dead. A death certificate, a funeral, a headstone, and the final handful of dirt I dropped with my own hand. If someone with that name returned now, a flood of questions would crash in from the police, the press, the insurance companies. The truth was too absurd to believe, and sometimes justice needs a cover to survive. That afternoon, in a small room at the Midwest WITSEC office, a federal employee set a new file in front of Evan. On the first page, a name was printed in blue ink, Robert Ellison. Below it, a temporary address, Charlotte, North Carolina. I looked at the line and felt my chest pinch. Evan, the boy I once held in my arms, taught to swing a hammer, taught to tie. A tie was officially gone. When the employee asked, "Do you want anyone to go with you?" Evan turned to me with a faint but steady smile. "Dad, will you come with me? You're the best part of what I have left." The words made my heart ache. I had lost many things: youth, my wife, our home, then even a son I thought I'd buried. But in that moment I understood. All of it had been traded for this, where father and son could begin again, in another life, under another sky. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, looking out at the misted backyard where Evan had practiced pitching at 10 years old. The kitchen was cold. The wall clock kept its steady tick. The smell of old wood mingled with the last trace of coffee. I thought of the years alone after my wife died. Cold dinners, a chair scraping in an empty room, the habit of turning on the TV just to hear another human voice. When Evan died, I thought my purpose went into the ground with him. But now, as he came back under another name, I understood maybe God hadn't planned my ending, but that I should witness a new beginning. The next morning, we started planning the future. Evan, or rather, Robert, sat at the table with a blank sheet spread out, his pen strokes firmer than I'd ever seen. "I don't want to just run," he said. "I want to start over, the right way. We've seen what greed and lies can do at Nova Medica, with Brewer, with Vanessa. I want to turn that into something useful, a business ethics and anti-fraud advisory. Not big, but clean." I listened, feeling both tenderness and pride. A man once wrecked by ambition now wanted to teach others how to be honest. Maybe that's how life lets the lost pay their debt. I nodded. "Need a partner?" "You'll be co-founder." He grinned. "I'm good at the technical and legal pieces, but you have what I don't, the instincts of someone who's done business and can read people." We chose a name, together. Ellison and Grant Ethical Advisors. Half true, half hidden, leaving just enough of a trace so memory wouldn't be buried completely. Alicia handled the legal filings. On the phone, her voice was gentle but confident. "You two will be fine. WITSEC has issued the new identifiers. All paperwork is legitimate. I'll consult from a distance, just don't mention Evan Grant to anyone. Dr. Langford sent a short email too. Good luck. Some mistakes in life should be buried on paper, but never in your conscience." I read that line again and again. It felt like a send-off, no drama, just peace. In the afternoon, I started calling our old neighbors. Mrs. Whitaker, who lived across the street, was surprised when she heard I was moving. "Are you sure, Harold? Starting over at your age? That's not easy." I smiled and looked out at the garden where the daisies had just bloomed. "I know, but maybe this is the first time in my life I'm starting for the right reason, not out of habit." I hung up and packed. I kept only a few clothes, a leather notebook, and one photo Evan and me by the lake the summer he turned 13. We were both grinning, holding fishing rods. I slipped the photo into my wallet, folded it, and tucked it into my inside pocket. It was the one thing I couldn't leave behind. The morning we left, a misty rain was falling. The drops were light as fog, just enough to make the road glow under the headlights. A federal pickup waited at the curb, luggage already loaded. Evan or Robert stood by in a brown coat, eyes calm but deep. I locked the door and took one last look around. The house was empty, but not sad anymore. Everything had closed at the right time. When I climbed into the truck, I felt as if I'd dropped 40 pounds, not the weight of things, but of the past. Through the window I looked one last time at our old street. Bare trees, the cracked brick wall, the wooden Grant residence sign Evan made at 18. All of it slid away into the soft curtain of rain. On the road to the interstate, Evan spoke quietly, eyes on the long line of yellow lights. "Do you regret it? Leaving? Starting over at your age?" I smiled. "No, you're never too old to live another life if you have a reason." He was silent a moment, then nodded. "Then I'll live too, not as a fugitive but as someone new." Outside, the light rain mixed with the steady hum of the engine. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the sound smooth my thoughts. When we passed the sign, "Leaving Wisconsin, Welcome to Illinois," I glanced at my son, the man now named Robert Ellison. I realized that sometimes God doesn't hand you a miracle. He gives you a chance to rewrite the last chapter of your life. And in the misty rain, I smiled, light as if I'd been born again. 3 months after we left Wisconsin, the first sign for Ellison and Grant Advisory went up on the second-floor window of an old building in downtown Charlotte. No flash, no neon, just simple etched metal, and beneath it the slogan Robert had written, "Truth first, profit second." I stared at the words for a long time. I didn't need to ask. I knew they meant more than a business philosophy. They were the declaration of 2 men once destroyed by lies who were lucky enough to survive and say again, "The truth deserves to come first even if you pay for it in blood." The office was small, barely larger than 500 square feet, 3 wooden desks, 2 computers, an old file cabinet, and a pot of hot tea in the middle. We didn't hire a receptionist. Any client walking in would see me at the front desk, white shirt, gray hair, a gentle smile, and I'd ask, "What are you looking for, advice or a hard truth?" Robert sat at the inner desk in a blue shirt, sometimes with glasses. His hair was cropped short, his beard clean, his calm face giving no hint that this man had died twice. Our first client was a mid-size medical device company in Raleigh. The CEO, a woman in her 40s, emailed saying they wanted an internal ethics audit after allegations of data manipulation in trial results. Robert and I went to their headquarters on a drizzly Monday morning. On the drive, I saw Robert staring out the window. "Back to healthcare," I said, half joking. He gave a thin smile. "Maybe fate wants me to return, but on the right side this time." We spent nearly 2 weeks on the files. I handled process and policy with my business experience. Robert dug into the technical data. In the end, I found a small but serious hole in patient data entry. One staffer could alter adverse event data without a second approval. When I showed Robert, he went still. "Just like Nova Medica," I said softly. "The difference is, they haven't crossed the line to cover it up." We wrote the report immediately. Robert proposed building a safe reporting culture, encouraging anonymous staff feedback, instead of firing people who spoke up. In the board presentation, he stood steady and clear. "If you want this company to last, your people need to believe that telling the truth is rewarded, not punished." The room went silent. When we finished, the CEO shook my hand, gratitude in her eyes. "You've saved our company from a bad future," she said. I smiled. "No, ma'am. We just pointed to a turn everyone should have seen." One morning in early April, while I was tidying the tea set, my phone buzzed. Alicia texted, "Update. Vanessa pled guilty. 12 years. Full restitution of insurance funds plus penalties. Diego was arrested in Guatemala and is being extradited." I read it aloud. Robert looked up and went quiet for a few seconds. "She really pled out?" I nodded. "Looks like her public defender knew there was no other way." He leaned back and stared out the window. His eyes narrowed slightly. His voice was so soft I had to lean in to hear. "Justice came. Late, but at least it came." I nodded. "And Diego?" "The FBI says he's on the international warrant list," I said. "Now no one's getting away." Silence filled the room. I watched Robert's shoulders loosen, as if someone had finally snipped an invisible wire that had wrapped him for a year. I didn't say congratulations because I knew there are victories you don't celebrate, only breathe through. That evening we sat in the office with the window cracked to let in the spring night air. The streetlight outside washed the wall where our Ellison and Grant Advisory sign hung. No champagne, no party, no guests, just 2 men and a pot of hot tea. Robert poured and slid a cup to me. "You know," he said, I once thought I'd never live long enough to see a peaceful day like this. I took a sip, warmth spread across my tongue. Peace is something you only value once you've lost everything. He gave a small smile and raised his cup. Then, a toast. To those who survived. I tapped his cup with mine. The ceramic note rang clear and crisp, like the last bar of an old song. Close to midnight, I stepped onto the small balcony and looked down at the street. Charlotte at night wasn't noisy like Chicago, just headlights and a piano drifting from the bar down the block. Inside me, a rare, easy quiet, no resentment, no fear. In the office, Robert, who used to be Evan, sorted files under the desk lamp. His forehead glowed. A gentle smile I hadn't seen in years returned to his face. I realized that maybe, for the first time since my wife died, I truly felt alive. The next morning, I taped a small note on the office door, right under "Truth First, Profit Second." In a shaky but firm hand I wrote, "For those who survived. Not by luck, but by choosing truth." I stepped back and watched the sign shimmer in the morning light. Robert came out, handed me a fresh cup of tea. The scent of mint lifted into the room. He asked, "What are you thinking about, Dad?" I smiled. "Just that, sometimes, victory doesn't need to be loud. It only needs to be warm like the tea you're holding." Robert laughed and sat beside me. We looked out at the clear blue sky where a few birds crossed. One chapter closed, another opened, quiet, simple, and full of truth. A year later, we returned to Oak Ridge Cemetery. April was warmer, but the wind still carried a trace of winter. New pale grass lined the path to the graves. Dew clung to old stone. I stopped before the headstone carved more than a year ago. Even Grant, 1989, 2024, beloved son, forever remembered. Beneath it lay an empty coffin, not holding a body, but a secret that saved a life. I stood a long time, staring at a name I could never erase, even though my son now wore another. Robert stepped quietly beside me and placed white chrysanthemums in the clay vase. He asked softly, solemnly, "Do you have any regrets, Dad?" I looked at the stone, light pooling in the carved letters, and answered slowly, "No, son. I only regret that greed once led too many people, including us, once upon a time." Robert nodded, eyes far away. He was different now, calmer, steadier, with the look of someone who'd crossed the line between life and death. I looked at him, and a feeling rose that I couldn't name, grateful and wistful at once. A year ago, I lost a daughter-in-law not to death, but to truth. In return, I gained freedom from manipulation and torment. I almost lost my son, but found him again in a way no one expected. A death on paper to save a living soul. Justice didn't arrive with a gavel. It came in the quiet of a plan, in small pieces of evidence, in signatures and sleepless nights. And then, one day, when the cold cuffs clicked shut, I understood. Sometimes the price of reclaiming justice isn't blood, it's identity. I kneeled and set a fresh bouquet of white chrysanthemums at the grave. Each petal beaded with dew, thin and bright in the early sun. I pressed my hands together and whispered, "Thank you for giving father and son one more chance to live, and to learn that truth, however painful, is the only road to peace." Robert stood beside me, eyes on the stone, quiet. I knew he was saying goodbye to the old name Evan Grant, who had to go so that Robert Ellison could exist. There was no pain left, only gratitude. We stood for a long while. The wind carried the smell of new earth and the rustle of dry leaves. In the distance, a church bell rang 3 short, clear peals, as if to mark the closing of something. On the way out, I looked back once more. Morning sunlight filtered through the branches and laid a long band of brightness across the headstone, like a hand on a shoulder saying, "That's enough. It's time to live." Robert drove slowly. The road back to Charlotte stretched clean and open. I leaned back and drew a deep breath of warm air, I knew our new life had truly begun. No more secrets, no more fear, only a gentle reminder. When justice arrives by the quietest means, it lasts the longest. That night, back at our small apartment, I took an old teacup and filled it with boiling water. The yellow lamp lit the wooden table where the sign for Ellison and Grant Advisory hung. Robert reviewed a new client file, his voice steady in the quiet room. I looked at my son and smiled. Sometimes victory doesn't need noise, it only needs warmth. I understood then that we were no longer out for revenge. We were two survivors, learning to live decently after the world had once been unfair. Before bed, I opened my wallet and looked at the old photo father and son by the lake when he was 13. I touched the boy's face in the picture and said silently, "You've come a long way, Evan. But whatever name you carry, you're still my son." I folded the wallet, turned off the light, and let the quiet settle over the room. Outside, the day had opened into sun gentle, complete, not blinding but warm enough to thaw what had once frozen in the heart. Thank you to all of you who stayed with me to the very last minute of this story. I'm Samuel, an old man still learning to stand straight in a storm, and I believe justice lives not only in courtrooms but in each right choice we make. If you're hearing this, I want to ask, what city are you watching from? Leave a comment so I can listen. Did the justice in today's story make you think differently about trust and truth? If this story touched you, please like the video, subscribe, and stay for the next episodes. Your companionship, those of you who still believe in what's good, is the reason a man my age can still feel his heart warm. And who knows, amid all the world's noise, maybe we'll meet again under another dawn, where the light of truth keeps guiding those who refuse to stop believing in it.